What's up, Scyushi Squad? We back again with some more Trove. Finally doing the next in our long line of class tutorials for 2020. Now, today we're going to be talking about the Shadow Hunter. Keep in mind, I don't actually have all of my proper gear on the Shadow Hunter, but I'm still going to end up giving you proper examples of what the stats should be that you're going for the mid to the end game. On top of all that, I know that it has been long overdue since I started up all of these class tutorials. Don't worry, I'll get all the 2020 class tutorials done before we go into next year. There's still plenty of other things that I can end up making tutorials on, but I'm going to try and I'm going to try and end up getting all these class tutorials actually finished by this year, because otherwise last year I kind of set out to do the same thing and then I didn't end up doing that. But I thought that we'd focus on Shadow Hunter because Shadow Hunter is actually one of the most popular characters in the game, despite the fact that the character doesn't actually reach its full potential. More on that in a bit, but before we get started with the video, I gotta let you guys know, if you are new to Trove, you can use that sign up link in the description. It's kind of like an affiliate link where anything you end up buying out of the cash shop, I'll make a percentage of that sale. Doesn't increase the price of anything, it's just a way you can support me. Check out all of these extra new packs, by the way. They're cool, but good God, game ago, like, slow it down. There's just too many of them and they're too expensive, dude. But anyways, the Shadow Hunter is going to end up being one of those characters that is not like, he's really cool, but I guarantee you, if you're sitting at home watching this and you're a Shadow Hunter right now and you're actually like kind of doing pretty good in like U9 or U10, if you take all of your gems and just swap all of that over to the Neon Ninja, for example, you're just going to notice that you are going to complete dungeons faster because you have more movement speed, and you will also be stronger. I found this out years ago and it was really disappointing, and unfortunately most of these classes haven't really changed that much over the following years. Some of them have had reworks, but my point is that Shadow Hunter is one of those characters that hasn't been touched since his class gem was added, and unfortunately means that you can take any of your gear off of the Shadow Hunter to another physical based character and you're probably just going to end up being faster, being stronger, whatever. But either way, we're going to be talking about the Shadow Hunter today because Shadow Hunter is still one of my favorite classes in the game because, good God, he's beautiful. You get your class gem and then you got a machine gun. He's also got some of the coolest like costumes in the game, I'd argue. I don't know. There's just something about him that we all really like, isn't there? I mean, I just wish he would get a rework. But anyways, as far as the gear and stats and everything and the allies, because not really much has changed over the years, as I mentioned, which means that my older class tutorials are still fairly relevant, but lots of people just keep requesting new updated ones, so here we are. Most of all, we've got the Delves now, so the Delves have replaced the Shadow Towers, and thus so we've got a whole bunch of new items that you can get out of them, which end up kind of making your character stronger and stuff like that, right? So anyways, as far as the gear is concerned, I've only got a Crystal 3 bow, and then ignore my other gear because that doesn't really matter. I'm not honestly shocked that I even have a C2 face on him for some reason, but whatever. If you can go for C4, okay, cool, but good luck with that. Otherwise, for the stats on your bow and on all of your gear, you're going to go for movement speed and crit damage. So movement speed second stat, or third if it's on, you know, crystal gear. Just pretend that the light stat doesn't exist and that it still signifies that it's the second stat. But you can either get crit damage second stat or movement speed second stat, because obviously the Shadow Hunter is not affected by attack speed as soon as you get your class gem ability, that is. Anything prior to that, you might want attack speed, just because then you'll be a little bit more efficient, because your base attacks are going to actually... they're not going to do damage, but at least you'll be able to attack more frequently, especially if you don't have another character or a friend that can end up helping you through dungeons and stuff. Shadow Hunter kind of sucks at the base game until you end up getting the class gem ability, and then it's going to make the difference. But the thing that's nice is you can build everything towards movement speed because you don't need that attack speed. But unfortunately, Shadow Hunter just isn't going to keep up in terms of movement speed compared to other physical based characters. And then more so than that, the damage. It just falls off compared to other characters, which is disappointing. So your base attack obviously is going to end up doing a decent amount of damage, but it doesn't phase through enemies, and it doesn't really have that much AoE. So you're... If for example there's a boss hiding behind a crowd of enemies, you're at a distinct disadvantage to any other class in the game, because every other character that is ranged just has so much damage that they end up destroying everything around. I don't know. I mean, I guess that's where your right click can come in handy, but honestly speaking, it's not particularly powerful unless an enemy's shadow marked, then it's okay. Your number 1 is going to keep you alive, give you a lot of good survivability, and then your ultimate ability, when it works, can be the highest damage in the game. When it works being the key word, because it gets caught on the terrain like all the time. As you saw right there, my arrow got stuck in mid-air, which means that it didn't launch forward and it wouldn't have actually damaged all of the enemies in front of me. It would have just damaged the ones that are close to my proximity. And it's weird, man. Like, the Shadow Hunter is just such a jank character, which is disappointing because I want to make the Shadow Hunter, but I can't for the sake of efficiency's sake, you know? Okay, so anyways, for your emblems and stuff like that, I always, or you know, flash emblems, whatever, I always go for Death Defying just because if you've built your character correctly, you will not have any health. You're going to get one shot by absolutely everything, and that's why Death Defying is one of, if not the most useful flask in the entire game. You can use Conjurer Crucible if you have higher magic find, but it means that you're going to be spamming your pots a lot more. I mean, you can kind of pick your poison. It doesn't really matter too much about the flask, but I always just use Death Defying because it pretty much is just the simplest solution, you know? And then for your emblem, you're pretty much always going to want to rock your Martial emblem, just because, like I said, Shadow Hunter isn't going to have the damage that's going to keep up with other characters. So unfortunately, swapping out Martial can be pretty difficult. I mean, you can swap it out if you want, okay? But it's entirely up to you. I like using Martial just because that extra damage means that you will actually be able to defeat a dungeon quite well, but you're gonna have to pop a flask every single time. And then for the emblem, if you want to go more defensive, you can use Unyielding because it pretty much gives you invulnerability frames. But other emblems that I can recommend is you could use Trailblazing as a alternate, like a secondary, just because it's going to give you more movement speed. And then you could actually use as a main instead of your Martial, or even as a secondary, Chromatic emblem, because basically Chromatic is going to make it so that your cooldown gets reduced every time you pop a flask, which means that you are going to end up being able to pop your ult a lot more, because again, when the ult works, it's really, really nice. If the ult worked like consistently and had a little bit less, like a little bit shorter cooldown, I think Shadow Hunter would already be in that sweet spot among all the other characters, just because you'd be able to hit enemies with your ult more often. And if it actually worked, well, then you could consistently do some actual damage numbers, right? You can always use some life-stealing allies and junk like that if you are having survivability problems, because with the Shadow Hunter base attack being just a stream of shots, it does mean that you actually have really good life leech. But as far as the allies are concerned, for the most part, you're just going to end up using... Why is it doing all of this to me? Please stop it. There's going to be the new Delves ones, so you'll end up getting these. You go into Delves, you end up crafting them, blah, blah, blah. We're not here to talk about how you end up getting all of these items. We're just talking about how you end up making the character good. You can use Aviar if you want, because it gains health when a nearby enemy dies, but it also gives you the movement speed, so it's kind of like your Raptor Berserker 2.0 because it has the extra light stat to it. Wait, Aviar's the magic one. I'm an idiot. Animated Jug, that's the one that I meant. I'm sorry. Animated Jug is the one that's Raptor Berserker, but better. Jingles is probably the one you're going to want to use as Shadow Hunter, though, just because it's like Chromatic, where it's going to end up just giving you the increased cooldown. So, again, you can use your ult more. Like, that's the thing, is it's frustrating because your ult is really, really good, especially if you're just doing dungeons where you know where the boss is. You can actually pop your ult. It's supposed to shoot through walls, and you could just kill the boss, and then you just move on to the next dungeon. Obviously, you're going to be wanting most of the loot that you get out of the dungeon, but still, it can end up being really, really fun if it actually is working consistently, but it doesn't work consistently. And then for the ring... You'll have to ignore that my banner and ring are in different slots. That's because of one of the mods that I'm using. But probably going for a secondary stat of crit. I don't know. I mean, it's up to you what stat you want to go for the ring. It's not super duper important, but crit hit is usually going to end up being your best bet. We'll get into the crit hit and crit damage ratios in the gems in a minute, because as for the banner... I always just use the Geoseeker one, not for any particular reason why. It's either that one or the one where more resources where you get from Delve enemies. That's just what I always use, and it gives you a standard light stat. Otherwise, you can use the Leviathan banners or torches. Those ones are really, really good. but of course requires you to fight multiple Leviathans, which is why I don't bother with them, because I'd rather have consistency, even if it means the cost of not being as efficient, right? Of course, the strongest banners in the game, or strongest torches in the game, are the permanent torches, which are extremely rare from the Leviathans. I don't have any of those, and I don't plan on getting any of them. Now, I'm actually going to swap over to my Vanguard, just because I have my physical set of gems over on my Vanguard. So you can pretty much use all of the stats that I'm going to show you here on my Vanguard, but just apply them to the Shadow Hunter, okay? So let's actually go to a gem forge so I can show you. So for the cosmic gems, I don't know why I have the Vampiric instead of Berserk. I guess because this one gives you the movement speed. It really depends where you're trying to build the character for. Shadow Hunter, I cannot recommend in Delves. You can still use it in Delves if you really want, but more so I would use Shadow Hunter just for normal dungeon grinding, and even then, if you have a better character, again, you can just swap all of your stuff over. But Vampiric, or Vampirium, is a really good cosmic gem just because it does give you the movement speed. But otherwise, if you just want raw damage, you're going to be going for the Berserk Battler, just because as you kill enemies, it's going to give you more light value, and light value is basically an armor penetration to enemies that are in Delves and Geode Surface and stuff like that. The stats that you're going to be getting on all of your cosmic gems are 3 pearls into light, and then the extra stats are going to be physical damage and crit damage, okay? Every single one of your cosmic gems is going to end up doing the same thing. Now, for the other gems, this is going to be what I keep calling a 6:3 ratio. So all of your empowered gems are going to have the same stats as 3 of your lesser gems, and then the other 3 lesser gems are going to end up being different stats. So that's why it's a 6:3 ratio, right? So for the empowered gems, it doesn't really matter super duper much how much, like what gems you end up getting, but Pyro Disc is a must. If you can get Explosive Epilogue, that one's really, really good in combination, because obviously, Shadow Hunter being a ranged character, it's going to affect it very much, and it does end up increasing your damage a lot. So Pyro Disc is kind of the mandatory one, just because it means that while you defeat enemies and stuff, you have a chance of triggering this, and then it gives you more movement speed, and movement speed is the lifeblood of the Trove end game. So you're going to end up having on all your empowered gems, including your class gem ability, 2 pearls into physical damage, 1 pearl into crit damage, and then no pearl into crit hit. So the last stat is always going to be crit hit. Again, that's going to be all of your empowered gems are going to have those stats, and then your lesser gems, you're going to have 3 of them that will have the same stat value. So 2 pearls physical, 1 pearl crit damage, and then crit hit. And then you're going to have the other 3 be 2 pearls into crit damage, 1 pearl into physical, and then crit hit is basically going to be the go-to stat that you have no pearls into, but it's going to be the last stat, because ultimately, even with no pearls in any of the crit hit, when you end up having a full set of really good gems all fully augmented and maxed out and everything like that, you will actually have over 100% crit hit. So any extra crit hit that you have in this game, you can literally just swap that stat over to max health on your gem instead, just to give you a little bit of survivability. It's not gonna make that much of a difference, but that's the thing, is with Trove, when you have 100% crit hit, you are literally hitting crits 100% of the time, rather than what most games do, which is slightly different. Did that already cover everything? I think we already did it. I mean, I guess I could always talk about food, but I never really talk about that, because food doesn't really matter that much. I mean, it does, but it doesn't. I don't know. The ideal stats, though, that you're trying to go for the Shadow Hunter are going to be as follows. So your physical damage is going to be, let's say 80k and up, you know, 100k, 120k, you're going to be doing decent for the end game. 150k is kind of ideal. Your crit damage, anything up from 800%, and you're going to be okay. 1.8 obviously is kind of the sweet spot, and then your crit hit you want to have as close to, if not at 100% as possible, right? And then, oh, I guess I should also mention the substat or subclass that you're going to end up using. I always just use the Knight, because it gives you that extra movement speed, and again, consistency, right? So you could swap it out for a couple other substats if you want. If you want more damage and you want more movement speed while you're walking around on the Shadow Hunter rather than your mount, you can use Lunacy, just because that one's gonna make you go big mode. But the thing about Lunacy is that it actually will not only scale your damage up a little bit, but most of all, it's because it gives you that extra attack speed, which again doesn't affect the Shadow Hunter as much. Unless you just want raw magic find, then you can always just use the Pyro. The substats don't really matter as much as you would think. But anyways, I think that covers everything. If there's anything that I missed, please be so kind, and you can ask in the comments, and I'm sure somebody will let you know if I don't myself. But you know, honestly speaking, I'm pretty busy right now because we've got like the Christmas event and everything like that I got to end up doing. So either way, thank you so much for watching. Really appreciate it. I don't know what class tutorial is going to be next because I'm kind of just doing them whenever I do them. See, Jubby's even really mad. She wants me to stop the video. Thank you so much for watching. Smash like, sub for more, buy the merch you want to support the channel, and have yourselves a fantastic day. Sign on. Stay epic, gamers.